The webinar today. So today we're going to be discussing the dataset badges and publication features, a new feature on ESS-DIVE, and I'm really excited to share it with you all. Okay. So I first want to start out with talking about the impact of these new features that we've released. Our goal with these new features was to allow users greater visibility into dataset publication status, to reduce the delays in the publication process by reducing the back and forth with ESS-DIVE support team, and to provide users with greater autonomy and less reliance on the ESS-DIVE staff. So these new features are designed to make the publication process a little bit easier and a little bit clearer for all of our data providers. You can see here a screenshot of the new feature, which is currently live on ESS-DIVE. So just to kind of give you guys a summary of where we're going to be going today, we're first going to start out talking about how data sets have been and are published on ESS-DIVE. We're going to discuss these new features and kind of how do you go about using them, how they might benefit you, and we're also going to discuss who actually can access these tools, as well as going through the documentation so that everyone has the best time possible using these tools. So the ESS-DIVE publication process. The ESS-DIVE publication process was designed to flow as you see here. It's meant to, we created this workflow with the idea of ending with a newly minted DOI managed by ESS-DIVE. So we start out submitting our data set, and once we have finalized our data set and are ready to submit it, and we've checked the assessment report, we request the publication review, which triggers an email, and it starts a conversation with the ESS-DIVE review team, who might suggest some changes, and we iterate through that. Finally, ESS-DIVE will issue a DOI and then immediately jump to publishing that data set with the DOI. But what about getting a DOI before actually being ready to publish? ESS-DIVE does that. ESS-DIVE issues what we call reserved DOIs, which you can use to cite your data set before publication. These are inactive until your data set is reviewed and published. So when we add that step in, the workflow that we created here gets a little more chaotic and looks a little more wobbly. So what it would be was that users would submit their data set, then request publication, even though they're not ready to publish, and email us back saying, I need a DOI, we reserve the DOI. Then they'd get around to finalizing it. Then we go through the remainder of the publication process. And finally, that data set is published under that reserved DOI. But that would definitely leave me feeling a little lost and confused. I would wonder, who do I message asking for a DOI? Does it happen before or after I hit this publish button, but I'm not ready to publish? And once I am ready to publish, how does ESS-DIVE know my data set's actually finalized and ready? And when I'm ready, do I actually remember to follow up? And where in my inbox did that go? I know my inbox is definitely, it's hard to find old emails. So with all of these questions in mind, we really wanted to make a UI that would illuminate a lot more of the process and make reserving DOIs a lot more simple. We have a little poll here, and I would love to just know how many of our participants here today have published data with ESS-DIVE. This is a multi-select, so for those who've never published data and received a DOI upon publication, kind of at the end. Maybe some folks here have requested DOIs before publishing, or they've published with an existing DOI, meaning they came with their data set and had a DOI right from the get-go. You can vote in the poll. Oh, yes, you guys got it. Let's see. Okay. I'd love to see some new data providers here. That's really exciting. Ooh, a change. Excellent. So it looks like about a quarter of you guys have already gone through the DOI process, or the reserving DOI process. Excellent. So hopefully for all of the participants here, we will give you a little bit more information about how this tool will change things, or for those who have published data, and hopefully for those 19%, we'll get you guys into the fold and get you guys publishing on ESS-DIVE. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to move on. Thank you all. This is really helpful information. Okay, now we get into the fun stuff, the new tools that ESS-DIVE has released. So as I mentioned at the head of this meeting, with the publication management tools, our goal was to create a user interface that would increase user agency in dataset publication and really allow users greater visibility into the ESS-DIVE publication process. But okay, those are a lot of buzzwords. So what that actually looks like in practice is from our metadata landing page, we have modified the publication button. And now, rather than just publish, it says manage publication for those who've kind of gone through this before. And what happens when we click on this button is we are taken to our manage dataset panel. So this panel is really meant to give you the status of everything and allow you to take action. So you can request publication review, reserve a DOI before publication, and you'll be able to see your statuses, the statuses of your data set right here in this panel, and all of these actions will change these statuses. So let's actually walk through how to go about using this. First thing we're going to do is requesting publication, the final step of getting it published, or the penultimate step before review. So this is a step, an element of the publication process that everyone will go through. So from this Manage Dataset window, you'll click the Start Publication Process. You can see here that the dataset status is currently listed as drafting. So we're going to start that publication process. And you'll get our little terms and conditions. This is kind of a reminder. It's fairly similar content to what we previously had in a little HTML pop-up that would come up on the landing page when you press the publish button. And it just reminds everyone to review the recommendations in the metadata assessment report, which is our tool to keep our data fair. And we'll discuss that a little bit more later. And this is just to help us get the highest quality metadata and to help speed your review along. And that you also understand that you'll have to go through the review process, that we want to speed it along. And we want to make sure that you're ready and willing and able to join us on the review. So once you have agreed to the terms, you'll click Request Publication. And that'll be it. And you'll see this nice message. It's very clear as to, or that your request has been published, or your request for publication has been submitted. As this text says, you'll receive an automated email confirmation for the about 80% of you who have been through publication with ESS-DIVE. It's a very similar process from here on out as it has been. So from here, if we go return to the main publication panel, you can see that your panel has changed, your dataset status has changed, and the button has been grayed out. So it's very clear that your dataset is in review. Also, once you close this panel, I don't have this in the slides, but once you close this panel, you'll see this little DOI status box will update, and we'll go through those statuses shortly. Now, reserving a DOI before publication is completely optional. As I mentioned earlier, If you publish a data set with ESS-DIVE and you don't have any DOIs, you don't reserve one before publication, the ESS-DIVE team will get you a DOI. So this is not a necessary step, but for those who might need a DOI before they've gone through the entire review process, we are able to do so, not through convoluted email chains, but right here in the UI. So from that manage dataset panel, you'll click reserve DOI, and you'll go through the terms and conditions. One of the things we really try to highlight in the user interface, and I will repeat many times throughout this presentation, is the reminder that your DOI will not function until your dataset has been reviewed and published on ESS-DIVE. One of the joys of a DOI is that it allows you to have a permanent redirect to your dataset landing page. But until we actually have your finalized dataset landing page, that DOI won't redirect anywhere. So you have, once we accept the terms and conditions saying that you've got it, you understand the reserved DOI won't work, and that you'll come back, you promise to come back, you can click the reserve DOI button, and you'll instantly have a DOI. No need to ask ESS-DIVE, no need to wait around for one person to get the other person to run the script to get the DOI. Nope, it's done. And right here, you can copy your citation for your data set, just for your records, whether that's to put it in a publication. And just also a reminder, all of this citation is created through the information in your metadata. If you don't like the citation, you can update those fields. And from there, you'll see your DOI status has changed and your DOI is already reserved. You can see back here, we reloaded the page in the back and the status has changed. Your big reminder is there. And once you've finalized, you'll hit that start publication process and get that data set published. Just as a reminder also, in this example, we have reserved the DOI before requesting publication. That doesn't have to be how it goes. The dataset DOI can be reserved at any time during the publication process. But reserving a DOI, as I said, is not required. You do not have to reserve a DOI. We will get you one if you don't want to deal with it or you don't need to deal with it. That reserved DOI, as I said, I'll say it over and over again until the cows come home. The reserved DOI won't work until you've gone through, hit that start publication process, and then not just started the publication process, but finished it. So we kind of talked through some of the different methods, but I'd like to kind of discuss why one might choose one option or the other for how they choose to get their DOI set up on ESS-DIVE. So the publication options, we've kind of broken it down into three main paths. The first one being publish with a new DOI. That's the most common publication option, as we saw. That's the one most of you guys have experienced, the plurality of you have experienced. That is where you request publication, and after the review, you're given a DOI and your dataset is published, all managed by the ESS-DIVE team. So that DOI you don't get that, this is a perfect situation for if you're in no rush, you have time, and you're ready and willing to get that publication review process completed before actually getting the prize of the DOI. The next option is if you don't have as much time, reserving a DOI before you've completed that publication review and been approved. So this is for folks who, need a DOI before it's done. And now with that UI, we're able to do that easily. Finally, the last option is publishing with an existing DOI, which I'm really glad to see some of the audience members have experience with that. And by existing DOI, what we mean is that the data that you're uploading to ESS-DIVE already has a DOI associated with it. That this is an exact copy of something that may have been on another repository that you're migrating into ESS-DIVE. And you want to keep that DOI and its history associated with this data set. And I'll go into a little bit more about how we get existing DOIs set up, since it's not quite as tied into the new publication features, but it is definitely part of the new publication features. So here's kind of the workflow as it exists now for publishing with a new DOI. It's fairly similar to the one we saw at the beginning in one of the early slides. So we submit our data, finalize, and then to start the process, we click that Start Publication button in the Manage Dataset panel. We go through the changes, and ESS-DIVE mints your DOI and publishes it once your data set has been approved. So one of the huge benefits of this is that there is no risk with sharing your data set. If you give the DOI potentially to a journal or put it in a journal article and share it with reviewers, one of the benefits of having gone through this process where you get a DOI at the end of the publication process is that you know that DOI is going to work as soon as you get it, as soon as it's in your hands. It should be, we want it to be working within 24 hours. It does take 24 hours for a DOI a newly minted DOI to actually redirect. So, but one of the huge benefits of this is that if you're sharing it, you know it's going to be working. So yes, as I said, DOI, this is the standard, and that DOI will be ready for you. Next one, or the next option of the three that we discussed, is reserving the DOI before publication. From the Manage Dataset panel, we can click the Reserve DOI, and your DOI will be reserved. And the process is fairly similar, but rather than getting a new DOI at the end, this DOI that was reserved up here becomes active, and that DOI now functions. The benefit of this change is that the process is a lot less wobbly than we saw earlier in the slideshow, and a lot more straightforward and simple. We're not having to we're requesting publication review when we are ready for the publication review. And the final option is publishing with an existing DOI. So we get the existing DOIs are submitted in the metadata in the existing DOI metadata field when creating your data set. And then once you finalize that submission, ESS-DIVE and requested publication review, ESS-DIVE will review it. We'll also double check that the DOI is pointing where we think, or where it needs to be pointing, that the DOI that you've submitted in this existing DOI field does function. And once we've confirmed all of that, we will set that DOI as the identifier of your data set and publish it on ESS-DIVE with that DOI. And just a reminder on DOIs that you are putting in the existing DOI field that are not managed by ESS-DIVE. ESS-DIVE will not be able to change the DOI URL for DOIs that we don't manage. So if you submit with an existing DOI that is not managed by ESS-DIVE, we cannot make any changes to that DOI record to make it point to ESS-DIVE or anything. There are opportunities for ESS-DIVE to manage DOIs. It's something we're growing and working on. And if that's something your project is interested, please reach out to ESS-DIVE support. A note on the existing DOIs and alternate identifier fields. With the creation of, or with allowing users to mint their own DOIs and reserve those DOIs before publication, there was some deep concern around creating duplicate DOIs for a data set. So in order to prevent this, what we chose to do was that we didn't want it so that if someone had something in the existing DOI field, that they would also be able to reserve a brand new DOI. So unfortunately, after a lot of hair pulling on my part, trying to figure out what defines a DOI. It's really tricky. And for right now, if there is any field in this any value in the existing DOI and alternate identifier fields, even something as benign as record ID 834234, that will prevent, or that is blocked by the, that will basically block the ability to reserve DOIs. That button will not be accessible. If you have data sets that you need alternate identifiers, maybe those are identifiers that were used in your repository. This is something we've already seen, but you do need a new DOI and you want to reserve a DOI, please reach out to us. I will also say, if you go through the standard publication process and you have a value in the alternate identifier fields that is not a DOI, the ESS-DIVE team will handle it. We'll get you a new DOI. But if you need to reserve a DOI before publication, start a conversation with us, talk to us, and we'll help you figure out a method to make this work. Okay, dataset and DOI status badges. We've seen these scattered around on some of the screenshots that I've shown you of the new publication feature. But I wanted to dive into what they mean, and why we have them. So the status badges are a way to kind of capture the current state of the dataset's publication status. And we kind of viewed that in two different segments. So there's the dataset status, which represents where the dataset is in the ESS-DIVE publication process, as well as the DOI status. This is for DOIs managed by ESS-DIVE. This is the up to the moment state of the DOI associated with this data set. So we are actually asking our DOI providers, what is the status of this data set? And they are telling us, they're giving us that information back. So this is really helpful to get a real pulse on, is that DOI working? Okay, let's go into, okay. This is where our DOI statuses live. Up here in the upper corner of our dataset landing page. At any time you can, of course this is a screenshot, but you're able to mouse over them to figure out what they mean. And you can click this little icon here to learn more and to access the documentation. Since we don't have those tooltips right now, let me tell you about what these statuses mean. So for our dataset statuses, these are the statuses that kind of capture where the data set is in the ESS-DIVE publication process. First one we have that every data set will start out at is drafting. So it's in progress. You haven't submitted anything. No action has been taken yet. Once we actually click that request publication button, the status will change to review. It's in the review pipeline. An ESS-DIVE reviewer will be reaching out. And this status will actually stay there as the conversation between the ESS-DIVE reviewer and the data submitter continues on. And once ESS-DIVE has approved the data set and run the, or kind of made the calls, the API calls, to trigger that change, your status will change to published. And this will mean that it will be searchable on the ESS-DIVE landing, or on the ESS-DIVE homepage. And if your DOI, if it is managed by ESS-DIVE, will be made live. And we'll get into the DOI statuses, since I said that little term, live. So these, again, are the live statuses. We're actively getting these real-time statuses from our DOI provider. But of course, not the first step. When you're at stage 0, your DOI status will be that no DOI has been added. This can be changed by publishing the data set, reserving a DOI, and providing an existing DOI once, and that will be set once the data has been published. The next status, I think hopefully you guys have seen this, the reserved status. that the DOI has been reserved for the data set, and broken record. This DOI will not function until the data set has been reviewed and published by ESS-DIVE. I feel like we could almost start a chorus with that refrain. So this is the status to let you know that while on your dataset landing page, you might see a DOI up top. That DOI does not function yet. The next status, once that DOI does function, is the active status, that DOI is live, accessible to the public, and that users can use that as a persistent, or to get a persistent link to your data set. And the DOI will be actively managed by the ESS-DIVE or by ESS-DIVE. Every change that you make to your data set after you've had a DOI associated with it will be sent to our DOI provider to keep your DOI record up to date. So once your DOI is active, if you have to make any changes, that DOI and its information will stay up to date automatically. The final status is a non-ESS-DIVE DOI. So this is a DOI that associated with a data set that is not managed by ESS-DIVE. Because we're not managing it, we can't get the status. So this is, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, maybe this is a data set that you originally had on Figshare, and you've made a copy of it on ESS-DIVE. We don't own the the Figshare DOI, so we can't really get you the information about what the status is. And if you have input an existing DOI into your metadata, this field won't, or this status won't show up until the ESS-DIVE team has actually set that DOI that you submitted in your metadata as the dataset identifier on the whole data or metadata page. So once you see it up top in the upper header bar of your dataset landing page, that this status will change from no DOI added, and once we set it, it will change to non-ESS-DIVE DOI. So this is one of the most important things. Who can actually see these new features on your data sets? The status badges can be seen by people who are in the editor and manager roles. So basically, you can kind of view this as anyone who can edit a data set. So if you've created your private data set and you've shared it with some of your teammates, anyone who is able to hit that edit button can see the statuses. Viewers are not able to see those statuses. And then the publication management button is restricted only to dataset managers. So those are people who have the manager role on the dataset. These are, if you've ever played with permissions, you were a manager on that data set. So those only managers can reserve DOIs, request publication, and then managers can also add more managers so they can delegate those tasks if needed. Just a little slide on sharing. You can use the share button to grant permissions to data contributors, collaborators, your project manager, your PI, even teams set up within ESS-DIVE are all able to be added to the share permissions and then be able to manage the data set or see the statuses. In order to actually make those modifications, you can access the sharing panel from the dataset editor. So once you click that edit button on a dataset at the top near the files submission area, you'll see the share button. And by opening this, you will you'll be able to modify the permissions. So we can see here, Madison is the manager of this data set, is the original manager of this data set. You can see her access here. Dylan here is an editor, so Dylan will only be able to see the statuses and will not be able to modify the actually request or reserve a DOI or request publication. And we can see here that we're adding the ESS-DIVE data managers group into the permissions, and we're adding them as managers. So that means that anyone who's part of this ESS-DIVE data managers group will be able to make changes to that data, or to request publication and reserve a DOI. I'm going to go back one slide. I just wanted to direct everyone's attention. If you're not familiar with the dataset sharing tools that we have, you can learn more on our docs website, ESS-DIVE or docs.ess-dive.lbl.gov, where we have pages on these sharing permissions. So what about the person who actually created the data set? A dataset's creator will always be a manager. Managers or creators' permissions cannot be altered or removed. They will always have access to that data set, and they will always be able to manage that data set's publication. So this, I will also say, we did have some issues with this for any folks who have been using the tool or the new publication features. We had some little glitches with the creator permissions, and we are very close to getting that fixed. So I just wanted to assuage anyone's fears, but catch that before we, Okay, I wanted to also dive into data usage and quality reminders. These are just a few little quick reminders that are related to all of the topics we've covered today. First off is citing data sets. So for a data set with a reserved DO, or for any data set, actually reserved DOI or not, you can click this Cite Dataset button at the top of your landing page. This is not inside the Manage Publication panel, but just right there on the landing page to get an up-to-date citation for your data set at any time. You can copy it to a clipboard. We really want to encourage the proper use or the proper use of citations with DOI. Really want to encourage everyone to remember to cite your data sets in your paper references section. And with this reserved DOI, and we've labeled it pretty clearly that DOI does not function yet. And one thing that Joe wanted me to remind everybody of is that really one of the huge benefits to not allow, if you reserve a DOI, don't let it linger, don't let it languish. And that's really one of the huge benefits of doing the standard publication process, where you get the DOI at the end, is that if you do share your citation anywhere, that DOI will work. So just wanted to kind of give everyone a reminder on citations to make sure to cite your data sets and make sure your DOIs are working. The other thing I wanted to give everyone a reminder of is the assessment reports. Right next to that Cite this data set button, we have access to our assessment reports, which will provide feedback while you're preparing your data set metadata. And the quality report is based on the FAIR data principles. FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And these are the pillars of creating great data. So we have created these automated checks that will try to help get data providers to the highest possible quality metadata. And just taking a look at these checks before finalizing your data set and you have to check that box saying at least you've looked at this. But we recommend checking it regularly, just making sure so that you don't have a lot to fix at the end. Okay, documentation. I want to just take a moment. Our team has created some really beautiful docs for this. Hopefully, I think they're beautiful. For all of the material that we've covered today. All of our docs can be found at docs.ess-dive.lbl.gov. And we have this new section on the topics we've covered today, called Publish Your Dataset. We also, in the published data section on the documentation, we also include information on the badges and the review cycle and metadata quality. I also wanted to just let everyone know, the docs also includes a troubleshooting guide. This is a new feature on ESS-DIVE, and there's always new things to learn and growing pains getting used to a new tool. So I highly encourage everyone to check out the troubleshooting guide just so that they can be prepared and be aware. I also wanted to direct people towards our webinar page. If you're an auditory learner, visual learner, we have webinars on a wealth of topics, including all sorts of topics related to what we've discussed for today. While today's webinar is new, we have older webinars on actually submitting data to ESS-DIVE, reporting formats, metadata quality, I believe. So you can explore the webinars on ESS-DIVE to learn more just about a wealth of topics. Summary. So hopefully you guys feel like I covered all of these points, discussing how we went through how datasets are published on ESS-DIVE. We looked at the new tools, explored what it looks like to use them, what the things mean, how we can go about using them. Hopefully we all feel clear on who has access to these tools and got a chance to take a look at, or got a chance to show off the documentation. I'm doing the summary just so that I feel like we did cover a lot of ground. So I want to make sure that you feel fresh before we dive into, the discussion, which is in a few slides, sorry. I wanted to also point people towards related resources. We wanted to announce our community data workshop for 2024. We would love to have everyone there. We'll be doing presentations from community members, tutorials, community discussions about what makes great data. So that will be November 14th and 15th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time. And we have the invitation link and agenda coming soon. Joe, if you can confirm this for me, if the invitation, does that go out on the ESS-DIVE mailing list?
Yeah, it'll be sent to the ESS-DIVE community list and all ESS PIs, and we'll encourage everyone to forward that to people on their teams as well. But yeah, if you're interested, you can join our mailing list, and I can put a link in the chat in a moment if you're not already on it.
Yeah, we'd love to have everyone there. It's always really interesting and really cool to see all the ways people are using ESS-DIVE. We have a few discussion topics. We'll also be opening the floor up for questions if people have really pressing questions they want to ask. Some of the discussion topics we were looking for are general feedback on these new features and status badges. One of the big questions we have, actually we'd love feedback on this, is we are working on figuring out reminder notifications for publishing reserved DOIs. And would you like them? Would they be annoying? How frequently or how soon after should we send them for them to not be annoying? And the other last topic I'd love to hear folks discuss is what other needs do you have around data DOIs and publication? So if people want to jump in on any of these topics or ask any other questions, please feel free to unmute and join us. Seeing some information in the chat. Okay. Earlier, Zach asked the question, do these automated fare checks use FUJI and other service, some other service or something that you made in-house? I'm actually not familiar with FUJI. yeah, as Joan mentioned in the chat, those are actually the fair checks created by NCs, who have also created the Data One Arctic Data Center, who we collaborate with on ESS-DIVE. But yeah, as Joan said, they've all been customized for ESS-DIVE. Does anyone else have any questions, feedback, concerns? Just thoughts on DOIs? Terry, thank you.
I just want to say thank you for implementing this into the tool. It's been very helpful. And it's nice to be able to go into a record and see the status, because there's often times where I've submitted something and it's like, did I or did I not? And then, as you just said, it's like, where's the email address that was on that? And so, yeah, this has been very helpful. And I appreciate you explaining about the alternate identifier and the angst about that, because we are one of the ones that have something already in the alternate identifier, which is our record ID. Most of the ones that we've got coming over that are transferred already have something, so that's fine. We don't need a reserved DOI. But for the new ones, I've explained this to people, and if they do need a reserve, I will emphasize what you just said. Don't ask for a reserved DOI unless you really need one. And if you do really need one, then don't put the record ID in until you ask for one. Right? Is that how it should work?
I absolutely agree. I think with enough cleverness, one could also definitely, I was thinking about using how I could use the API to, save my record numbers and then request the DOI and then push the JSON to update the record. But that's yeah, absolutely. And of course, I think that this is our first go at this, and I have a lot of things I'd love to see this grow into. And I think, even just the feedback of, it is kind of silly to have to remove your record ID number. So I think that's something we're going to grow on, and we're looking to figure out how we want to improve that. I think there's a lot of cool growth that can happen with this tool. But I'm also really happy to hear it's been working out.
Just as long as you know the workflow. I mean, there's lots of workarounds that you have to do, just because sometimes it's just the way the system has to be set up. And if you work in some system for a while, then you figure that out and you understand that there's complications.
Absolutely.
I will ask another question. Well, I'll ask a question. Is there a way, since you're recording those, whether it's in draft or in review, is there a way to go into the API and to search to see which ones may be outstanding that we haven't addressed in a while?
It might be coming soon.
Okay.
I think that's
not right now. Terry, this is Valerie. There's not right now. And the reason being is that we get those statuses directly from OSDI, and we don't index them.
This is whether or not just a data set is in a review or not within your database.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, we're not indexing that right now either. But yeah, the status of the DOIs comes directly from OSDI, and then the other statuses are inferred. Okay. But we could probably think of something, depending on what the workflow is.
Yeah.
I know that's something that has been definitely, I know that you guys have done a lot of out-of-band processes for keeping track of that. And that's something where I often think of, and we often discuss when we're talking about tracking statuses, is we know that I think you guys have this huge spreadsheet of all the statuses of your data sets. And that's something we think about when we're discussing, like, how can we grow this?
Okay. Thank you.
I think it would be really great if you wanted to just detail what your workflow is. That would be very helpful for us to think through what we could do on that end.
Okay.
Okay, I see another question from BB. I've reserved a DOI before, And as you said, it doesn't link anywhere. Would it be possible to have it go to some kind of page that says the DOI has been reserved and will be available when the data package is published? I think that based on my experience with our DOI providers, I don't think they would not care for that. The reserved DOI or the published DOI is really meant to be a unique identifier that points to a unique location. I have seen in the past where DOIs there were multiple DOIs pointing to the same URL, and the folks at OSTI who provide us our DOIs, they did not like that. They actually they were very frustrated with that, and they felt like that was not how the DOI should be being used. DOIs, when they are active, should be directing to whatever the object is, and I don't think we can. I know for certain that our DOI providers would not be happy with having a DOI that points to a basically 404 page.
Yeah, I mean, think of a DOI as a long-term preservation identifier. And it guarantees that when that goes public, that just like any journal paper, a data set, the data will be there and it will be published. We can't have it go to a temporary page that would be breaking the purpose of those DOIs. And so we would probably fall out of good standing as a trusted repository.
For that answers your question, BB. Does anybody else have any other questions? I'd love to also hear thoughts on reminder notifications. That's like we would like to figure out how to implement reminder notifications for reserved DOIs, and I think you have the opportunity to make us do what you want. Okay, maybe raise your hand if you would be annoyed by getting an email every week. Okay. Raise your hand if you'd be annoyed getting an email every month reminding you that you have a reserved DOI. Okay, so it's more than a week, less than a month. Okay, now second question on if we emailed you once a week reminding you of a reserved DOI. Do you think that annoyance would be painful for you, or would it actually spur you to get your DOI done? Is that a vote for one of the other?
Sorry. I was gonna speak out loud because there wasn't a yes or no for that. I was gonna say most of the time when we're reserving a DOI, it's because the journal requires a DOI, but not necessarily published data, and we're waiting to get reviews back from the paper that might change the data before we're actually publishing the data. And so oftentimes that takes a lot of time. And so weekly reminders would be a little bit too much for that, and I think would bog down our, we communicate with our other communication with ESS-DIVE, so I think that longer time period would be more ideal for our project.
Excellent, awesome. That's really helpful to know. How many other folks are in a similar boat where they're reserving a DOI specifically for journals. Just raise your hand if you feel like you're in a similar boat to Brianne. Excellent. Now I'm curious, how many folks feel like they are in or have been in the opposite boat of Brianne, where that, or it's not opposite, have not been in that boat where they were reserving a DOI, but not for a journal? I'm just curious. That is illuminating. Cool. Thank you, guys. Okay, excellent. Yeah, as Charu mentioned, a reminder, journals will flag any reserved DOIs that are not published since the links don't work. Are there any, I don't know, does anyone have any concerns around the new features? Any things that you'd love to see as we grow and go forward? Okay, Stephanie posted, this is unrelated to the DOI process, but something I'm still campaigning for us campaigning for us is an easier way to upload author lists and sites without using the API, like a CSV upload. Ooh, that's really interesting. It'd be really cool to hear more and discuss that, like, discuss that a little bit more. How we'd want to see that happen. We can learn more. Brianne.
I'm thinking for versioning or when there's like an update to a data set, is the process still emailing and asking for those files to be reviewed, or if that could be wrapped into the managed publication?
I think that'd be a really, that is a development I think we'd really like to see on ESS-DIVE from our side as well. We really want to see that change. And that's really good to hear that's something that they use, that, yeah, you guys as users want to see. Yeah, that's something I think that would really benefit us.
I wanted to maybe add something on Breeze. Just a thought. Even if we still have to email to get a previous version, having maybe like a section on the data package that says this package has been versioned, and just kind of have a list of like the previous versions or something, or how many times, and then people can see that and say, okay, I need to email to get that one, just so that they know kind of version name and then maybe when it was published.
Absolutely. I know Joan has kind of spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, Stephanie. We are working on some documentation for versioning, so we can include something like a recommendation on that. And we do have some milestones around versioning, like to improve our support for versioning in the future too, but that'll be a little while.
I guess one thing on the versioning topic that I'd be interested to hear about. So there's kind of a lot of discussion between, or when you have a data set with a DOI, and you want to create a new version, do you want to create a new version on that DOI, or do you create a new DOI for that new version? I'd love to hear kind of people's thoughts. Maybe we can do a hand raise thing. I think there's some sort of polling thing. I don't know if anyone knows how to do that. Maybe I guess maybe raise your hand if you prefer to get a DOI by, or you'd rather, when you create a new version, you would rather add to the existing DOI. Raise your hand. Cool. And now let's do the opposite. If you prefer to raise your hand if you would rather get a new DOI for every version. The resounding silence. Excellent. That is really good to know. It's always like there are always these little questions. I'm so glad to have the space to. Kim adds, it depends on how extensive the changes are. I think that's a really good point. What are the kind of changes that you feel like would make it big enough to feel like it deserves its own DOI?
Yeah, on that, I guess an update to like small details or metadata details wouldn't initiate a new DOI, but say, you changed your entire data processing workflow or something and got different answers, then I think in that case, it would definitely be a version 2.0, like do not use the previous one. But obviously, if people have used the previous one, they need to retain that as a distinct entity, perhaps.
Absolutely. That's definitely really important for those who do replication studies.
We have some data sets that are ongoing. So every year they get new data added, but the old data that was existing is not changed. Or if something is different, then it's put in the abstract. But the reasoning is that don't change what was already posted, just add to it if it's, sequential years.
PD asks, how does versioning with a new DOI work? If V1 has the original DOI and you update it to V2 and request a new DOI, what would happen if someone tried to use the original DOI? So in that case you described where V1 has a DOI and V2 has its own unique DOI, if someone tried to use the V1 DOI, they would just be directed to V1, which is definitely, I think, when you talk to a lot of like the very serious data people, that is preferred because yeah, as Kim mentioned, like it should still continue. Like there are a lot of folks who really feel like it should continue to exist as it was when that DOI was used. But I think one of the things that we're often thinking about is the relationship between DOIs and like how could we say when someone goes to the V1, follows the V1 DOI, how could we communicate to them that hey, V2's over here, come check it out. So if I have the original DOI, then I don't need to email ESS-DIVE to request V1. I'm not quite clear on.
Is my mic working?
Yep.
Okay. I was correct me if my understanding of this is wrong. I was under the impression that when you version a specific data package, it would get like a new version number and you could decide if you wanted to retain the same DOI or get a new one.
Actually, so on ESS-DIVE, if you create an update on an existing data package, that would compound, or on an existing data package with a DOI, that would just become a new ESS-DIVE identifier version under that same DOI. So that if you just make a change to a data set on ESS-DIVE that already has a DOI, that will not allow you to create a new DOI.
Okay, so if I wanted a new DI, then that's a new second data package.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense now.
I know Joan has, I don't want to speak out of turn. I know Joan has done a lot of really cool stuff on this. There's a lot of cool exploring around like, okay, well, like how can we share DO or make relationships clear? I'm excited about that stuff, Joan. Did I miss anything in the chat? Zach, I'm excited to check out this future data standards. I always love new data quality. Excellent. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to speak up. Of course, I wanted to, if you don't want to speak up now, or maybe you remember something and think of something in 20 or 30 minutes, hours, days, we're always around. You can reach out to us at ESS-DIVE support@lbl.gov. I also wanted to just give everyone the point towards the documentation again. Our team has worked really hard on trying to get documentation for all of the wealths of things that ESS-DIVE does. And so hopefully we've tried our best to answer every possible question in there. So definitely check out the docs. Even if you're a veteran ESS-DIVE user, always good to get a refresher. And yeah, I think Joan already put this in the chat, but we have our ESS-DIVE community mailing list where you'll be hearing about our exciting user meeting coming up soon.
Thank you.
That's it. If anyone has, I'm going to stick around for a little while, so if anyone has questions, I want to talk one-on-one. But I think we can call it here. Thank you everyone for joining.